The plasma cannon screamed across the void, and I watched Admiral Marcus Kane turn the pride of the Xelon fleet into cosmic debris with nothing but a smirk on his scarred face. My name is Thrak Dull, former strategic analyst for the Galactic Council, current prisoner aboard this human dreadnought, and witness to the most spectacular military disaster in recorded history. 3 cycles ago, we betrayed humanity. Today, they are systematically dismantling everything we built across 7 star systems, and frankly, we probably deserve it. The bridge of the UES Retribution shuddered as another Xelon cruiser exploded in brilliant orange flame. Kane stood at the tactical display, his weathered hands dancing across holographic controls with the precision of a concert pianist. Blood still dripped from a gash above his left eye, a souvenir from the boarding action that had claimed this ship 6 hours earlier. "Commander Torres," Kane called out, his voice carrying that particular human quality that made my scales itch with unease. Casual authority mixed with barely contained violence. "How many of their ships are left in this sector?" Elena Torres, the human weapons officer, consulted her display with the enthusiasm of someone counting birthday presents. 14 capital ships, sir. Down from 43 this morning. Excellent. Kane's smile could have frozen methane. Signal the Vengeance and the Fury. Tell Captain Brooks and Captain Yang to begin the next phase. That was when I realized just how thoroughly we had miscalculated. The humans were not simply fighting back. They were executing a strategy that had been planned long before our betrayal. Every movement, every tactical decision, every seemingly impossible victory had been anticipated, prepared for, and weaponized. 6 months earlier, I had been part of the Council's inner circle, one of the architects of what we called the necessity. Humanity had grown too powerful, too unpredictable, too dangerous to the established order. Their expansion into the Outer Rim territories, their refusal to accept traditional hierarchies, their stubborn insistence on treating all species as equals rather than acknowledging the natural superiority of older civilizations, it had become intolerable. The plan had been elegant in its simplicity. A coordinated strike across human space during their Festival of Unity, when their fleets would be scattered for celebration rather than concentrated for defense. 12 species, 40,000 ships, and the element of complete surprise. We would cripple their military capability, occupy their worlds, and integrate them properly into galactic society. What could possibly go wrong? Everything, as it turned out. Thrak, Kane said, turning toward my containment field with that predatory human grin. You were telling me about the Corvan defense grid. How many orbital platforms protect their homeworld? I had stopped pretending I would not answer his questions 2 battles ago. Human interrogation techniques were not particularly brutal by galactic standards. But they possessed an uncomfortable efficiency. They asked the right questions, drew connections I had not seen, and somehow always knew when I was holding back information. 237 platforms, I admitted, my translator rendering my hisses and clicks into human standard, each armed with quantum torpedo launchers and adaptive shielding. Crew complement? 40,000 beings per platform. Kane nodded thoughtfully. So roughly 9.5 million defenders total, not counting the surface installations or the fleet elements. The casual way he processed those numbers made my blood run cold. The normal military commander would see insurmountable odds. Kane saw logistics. Sir, Torres interrupted, we are receiving a transmission from High Command. Put it through. The holographic display shimmered, and the image of Fleet Admiral Sarah Chen appeared. Even through the static-filled connection, her presence dominated the bridge. Behind her, I could see the organized chaos of a command center at war. Officers moving with purpose, while tactical displays showed the positions of hundreds of human ships across multiple star systems. Marcus, Chen said without preamble, status report. Xelon Third Fleet has been neutralized, Kane replied. We captured their flagship intact along with Admiral Vex Thulu and his staff. Commander Torres estimates we have enough intelligence to compromise their entire defensive network. Outstanding. What about casualties? Minimal. The new boarding pods worked exactly as designed. We lost 6 ships total, mostly frigates. Chen nodded with satisfaction. Excellent. Phase 2 is authorized. Take your battle group to the Corvan system and begin siege operations. Admiral Kim will provide support with the Second Fleet within 48 hours. Understood. What about the Council's attempts at negotiation? Chen's expression became arctic. Tell them they can negotiate with the survivors when this is over. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Kane turned back to his tactical display, apparently unmoved by the casual dismissal of billions of lives that hung in the balance. This was the moment I began to understand what we had actually done. We had not attacked a peaceful trading partner. We had not struck at a developing civilization. We had declared war on something that had been preparing for this conflict since the day they first looked up at the stars and wondered what was out there. The humans called it the sleeping giant doctrine. For every visible ship in their fleet, 3 more lay hidden in deep space caches. For every known colony, 2 shadow worlds existed beyond our maps. For every diplomat who smiled and shook appendages at council meetings, 10 intelligence operatives gathered information on potential threats. They had known this day would come. They had planned for it. And now they were executing a response that made our surgical strike look like children throwing stones at a fortress. "Thrake," Kane said, breaking into my increasingly dark thoughts. "Tell me about the Corvan evacuation protocols." I stared at him through the containment field. "What makes you think they have evacuation protocols?" "Because you are all terrified of dying, and the Corvans are the most paranoid species in the Council. They have contingency plans for everything, including the complete destruction of their homeworld." He was right, of course. The Corvads had spent centuries perfecting their survival strategies. Hidden bunkers, distributed leadership, redundant communication networks, and yes, evacuation protocols that could move their essential population to secure locations within hours of an alert. Standard procedure calls for immediate civilian evacuation to the agricultural worlds in the outer system, I said, knowing that resistance was pointless. Essential personnel would retreat to the deep core bunkers. How long would it take to complete civilian evacuation? 18 to 20 hours. Assuming optimal conditions. Kane smiled again, and I felt my stomach drop into my feet. "Commander Torres, signal the fleet. All ships are to jump to the Corvan system immediately. We will arrive in 6 hours." "Sir," one of the human bridge officers called out, "that will put us there before their evacuation is complete." "Yes," Kane replied with chilling satisfaction. "It will." The next few hours passed in a blur of hyperspace calculations and tactical briefings. The human crew worked with mechanical efficiency, each officer perfectly clear on their role in the coming battle. There was no grandstanding, no dramatic speeches, no appeals to honor or glory. They approached warfare the same way they approached everything else, as a problem to be solved with the appropriate application of technology, strategy, and overwhelming force. I found myself thinking about the first time I had encountered humans, nearly 20 years ago during my service as a junior analyst. They had seemed so ordinary, smaller than Corvans, weaker than Zelans, shorter-lived than my own species. Their technology was adequate but not revolutionary. Their ships were functional but not elegant. Their diplomatic style was direct to the point of rudeness. What I had failed to recognize was their capacity for adaptation. When the Zelans introduced superior shield technology, humans did not simply copy it. They analyzed it, improved it, and then developed weapons specifically designed to penetrate it. When the Tharaki demonstrated advanced metallurgy, humans took that knowledge and created hull composites that were lighter, stronger, and more flexible than anything in the galaxy. Most importantly, when other species showed them new ways to kill efficiently, humans took notes. The hyperspace alarm chimed, and Kane moved to the command chair with practiced ease. Around him, the bridge crew began their final preparations for what would either be a glorious victory or a magnificent disaster. "Drop us out at the system perimeter," Kane ordered. "I want sensor sweeps of all planetary bodies and a complete tactical assessment within 10 minutes of emergence." The stars elongated, twisted, and snapped back into focus as the Retribution dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Corvan system. Immediately, the sensor stations erupted with activity as human technology began cataloging everything within light minutes of their position. "Multiple contacts," Torres reported, her fingers flying across her console. "I count 47 capital ships in defensive formation around Corvan Prime. Orbital platforms are powering up weapons systems. Long-range sensors detect massive civilian traffic moving toward the outer planets. Fleet status: 32 ships of the line plus escorts. Admiral Brooks reports ready for immediate engagement. Kane studied the tactical display with the intensity of a predator selecting prey. The Corvan defense fleet was impressive by any standard measurement. Their ships were well designed, heavily armed, and commanded by officers with centuries of experience. The orbital platforms could generate enough firepower to sterilize a continent. The planet's surface defenses included weapons that could reach deep space. Under normal circumstances, attacking such a target would require a fleet twice the size and months of preparation. But these were not normal circumstances. Signal all ships, Kane commanded. Implement pattern Omega. Target priority is orbital infrastructure, then capital ships, then anything that moves. Sir, the communications officer called out, we are receiving a transmission from the Corvan High Command. They are requesting terms for negotiation. Kane's laugh was like breaking glass. Tell them we will negotiate after they surrender unconditionally. They have 10 minutes to comply. The reply came back within seconds. Defiant rejection laced with threats about galactic law and civilized behavior. Their choice, Kane said with a shrug. All ships, weapons free. Begin the attack. What followed was not so much a battle as a demonstration of applied violence. The human ships moved in perfect coordination, their fire patterns interlocking to create zones of destruction that the Corvan fleet could not escape. Advanced human weapons systems, technologies that had never been revealed to the Council, carved through defensive formations like hot knives through protein gel. The orbital platforms, those mighty monuments to Corvan engineering, lasted exactly 14 minutes before the last one exploded in a cascade of secondary detonations that lit up the planet's upper atmosphere. But the most terrifying aspect was not the destruction itself. It was the precision. Human targeting systems did not simply destroy enemy ships. They disabled specific subsystems, captured escape pods, and preserved infrastructure that might prove useful. They were not killing out of rage or revenge. Though both emotions were certainly present, they were killing as part of a larger strategy that required certain assets to remain intact. Drake, Kane said as the last Corvan battleship surrendered, what do you know about the location of the Council's strategic reserves? I stared at him in horror. The reserves were the final fallback, the hidden fleets and secret weapons that were never supposed to be revealed unless the galaxy itself faced extinction. I do not have access to that information, I stammered. Kane smiled again, that cold, predatory expression that had haunted my dreams since my capture. That is unfortunate, he said, because Admiral Chen has just authorized the deployment of our own strategic reserves. He gestured to the tactical display, where new contacts were appearing throughout the system. Ships that had been hidden in asteroid fields, cloaked behind planetary bodies, and concealed in the spaces between worlds. Dozens of them, then hundreds, all bearing human markings and all broadcasting the same message. The sleeping giant had awakened and it was hungry for blood. Phase 3 begins in 6 hours. Kane announced to his crew, Signal Fleet Command, that the Corvan system is secure and ready for occupation. Tell Admiral Chen we will need at least 4 occupation divisions, and the specialist teams for infrastructure assessment. As the human fleet began organizing their conquest of yet another star system, I finally understood the full scope of our mistake. We had not betrayed an ally. We had not attacked a rival. We had awakened something that had been waiting for an excuse to show the galaxy exactly what human beings were capable of when they stopped pretending to be civilized. And we were about to learn that there were fates far worse than simple death. 6 hours later, I learned what true terror looked like when it wore a human face. Admiral Chen's strategic reserves did not simply arrive at the Corvan system. They materialized from the void itself, as if the universe had decided to vomit forth every nightmare weapon humanity had ever conceived. Stealth carriers the size of small moons shed their cloaking fields. Dreadnoughts emerged from hyperspace with hull configurations I had never seen in any intelligence report. And behind them came something that made my translator circuits stutter in confusion. What in the name of the void is that thing? I whispered, staring at the tactical display. Kane followed my gaze to the massive contact that had just appeared at the edge of sensor range. The computer was having difficulty classifying it, cycling through designations like Mobile Station, Super Dreadnought, and finally settling on Unknown Configuration. That, Kane said with obvious pride, is the UES Ragnarok. Humanity's first and only planet killer. The words hit me like a plasma blast to the chest. Planet killers were theoretical weapons, discussed in academic circles but never actually constructed. The energy requirements alone would bankrupt most civilizations. The ethical implications had led to galaxy-wide treaties prohibiting their development. Apparently humans had not signed those treaties. "Commander Torres," Kane called out, "patch me through to Admiral Chen aboard the Ragnarok." The holographic display shimmered, and Chen's image appeared. Behind her I could see a command center that dwarfed anything I had ever imagined. Hundreds of officers worked at stations that controlled weapons systems capable of cracking planetary crusts. The scale was staggering, terrifying, and completely illegal by every law of civilized warfare. "Marcus," Chen said without preamble, "how are our guests handling the revelation?" Kane glanced at me with amusement. "Thrak appears to be experiencing some cognitive dissonance. I think the reality of human military doctrine is finally settling in." "Excellent." "Has he provided the information about the Council's hidden facilities?" "Not yet, but I suspect his cooperation will improve shortly." Chen nodded. "Begin Phase 4 as soon as you have everything we need. The Thorak Republic is mobilizing their reserve fleets, and Admiral Park reports that the Zelon home system is preparing for siege conditions." "Understood." "What about the diplomatic channels?" Chen's expression became glacial. "The Council has rejected our terms again. They are demanding we cease hostilities and submit to galactic arbitration." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of absolute conviction. "Signal all fleet commanders. Execute Protocol 7 across all operational theaters." Kane's face went rigid with concentration. "Admiral confirming Protocol 7 authorization?" "Confirmed. It is time the galaxy learned why humanity spent 2 centuries preparing for this day." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in ominous silence. Around me, human officers began implementing orders with mechanical precision, but I could sense an undercurrent of anticipation that made my scales crawl. "What is Protocol 7? I asked, though part of me did not want to know the answer. Kane studied me for a long moment, as if deciding how much truth I could handle. "Protocol 7 is what happens when we stop playing games," he said finally. "Every human colony, every research station, every supposedly civilian installation throughout the galaxy begins transmitting its real purpose." My blood froze. "Real purpose? Did you really think we spent 200 years building peaceful farming communities and scientific outposts?" Kane's laugh was bitter. "Every human presence outside our home systems is a military asset. Every colony has hidden weapon caches. Every research station conceals surveillance equipment. Every civilian transport can be converted to a warship within hours." The tactical display updated, and I watched in growing horror as new contacts appeared throughout the galaxy. Not just ships, but installations, platforms, and facilities that had been invisible to our sensors for decades. The scope was staggering. Humanity had not simply expanded into the galaxy. They had weaponized their entire presence. "Incoming transmission from the Thorak system," Torres reported. "Admiral Park requests immediate consultation." "Put him through," Kane ordered. The hologram of Admiral David Park materialized, his uniform torn and blood-stained. Behind him, the bridge of his flagship showed signs of recent combat, with smoke drifting from damaged consoles and crew members working frantically at emergency repairs. "Marcus," Park said urgently, "the Thorak Republic has activated their home defense grid. They are using civilian populations as shields around military installations." Kane's expression hardened. "Casualties?" "Minimal so far. We have been able to extract most non-combatants before engaging targets, but their defensive strategy is slowing our advance considerably." "Unacceptable. Admiral Chen has authorized Protocol 7. Begin conversion of civilian assets immediately." Perk's image sharpened with understanding. "All assets? All assets. Signal the agricultural platforms to begin weapons deployment. Tell the research stations to activate their surveillance networks, and inform the trading post that their real mission begins now." "Understood." What about the refugee convoys? Kane's smile was predatory. The refugee convoys will continue exactly as planned. The Thorak Republic is about to learn why humanity spent 50 years building the most efficient transportation network in the galaxy. The transmission ended and I felt my worldview collapse entirely. The refugee convoys, those massive humanitarian missions that had evacuated billions of beings from war-torn systems, had been military operations from the beginning. Humanity had not simply been helping refugees. They had been positioning assets throughout the galaxy under the cover of compassion. You have been planning this for decades, I said, the words coming out as barely a whisper. Longer than that, Kane replied casually. The first strategic planning sessions began the day we made contact with galactic civilization. Every treaty we signed, every trade agreement we negotiated, every diplomatic protocol we accepted was designed to position us for this moment. But why? We offered you partnership, equality in the Council. Kane's expression became deadly serious. Because we studied your history, Thrake. Every species that joined the Council voluntarily eventually found themselves marginalized, exploited, or absorbed. The strong devour the weak, and the established powers maintain their positions through careful manipulation of newcomers. He gestured to the tactical display, where human fleets were systematically dismantling the infrastructure of three-star systems simultaneously. We chose a different path. Instead of accepting our assigned role as grateful junior partners, we decided to teach the galaxy a lesson about the dangers of underestimating human adaptability. The communications console chimed with an incoming priority transmission. Torres accepted it immediately, and the image of a Thyric military commander appeared on screen. The reptilian being's normally calm demeanor was shattered, replaced by obvious panic. Human forces, the Thyrak commander said in heavily accented standard. We wish to discuss terms for cessation of hostilities. Kane leaned back in his command chair with obvious satisfaction. Admiral Sector, how good of you to contact us. I trust your defensive operations are proceeding satisfactorily. Our orbital platforms have been neutralized. Our fleet elements are scattered or destroyed. Your forces have somehow compromised our planetary defense networks. The Thyrak's voice carried a note of bewilderment. How is this possible? Your ships numbered fewer than ours when the engagement began. Numbers are not everything, Admiral. Strategy, preparation, and the willingness to commit totally to victory tend to be more decisive factors. What are your terms for surrender? Kane's expression became thoughtful. Unconditional surrender of all Thyrak military assets, complete cooperation with human occupation forces, full disclosure of all Council military installations within your territory, and most importantly, you will provide us with the current location of Councilor Prime Yexkul. The Thyrak commander's scales visibly paled. The Councilor Prime is beyond our authority to surrender. He operates under direct Council protection. Then you had better find a way to extend your authority, Kane said with chilling finality. You have 1 hour to comply. After that, we begin targeting civilian infrastructure. The transmission ended, and Kane turned back to his tactical display with the air of someone reviewing a shopping list rather than planning genocide. Sir, Torres called out, we are receiving multiple transmissions from across the galaxy. It appears that Protocol 7 has been extremely effective. Specify. The Zellan home fleet has surrendered after their capital shipyards mysteriously exploded. The Morgani Republic is requesting immediate ceasefire after their communication networks were compromised, and the Kesh Dominion reports that their entire merchant marine has declared for humanity. Kane nodded with satisfaction. What about the Council response? They are confused, sir. Our intelligence assets report emergency sessions and increasing panic among Council leadership. They appear to have seriously underestimated the scope of human preparation. Excellent. Signal Admiral Chen that Phase 4 is proceeding ahead of schedule. We should be ready to begin final operations within 48 hours. I found my voice, though it took tremendous effort. Final operations? Kane turned to me with that predatory smile I had learned to fear. The assault on Council Prime Threk. The heart of galactic government. The symbol of established order. The fortress that has never been successfully attacked in 3,000 years of recorded history. That is impossible, I said. though even as the words left my mouth I knew they were meaningless. Humanity had already accomplished a dozen impossible things in the past week. Is it? Kane pulled up a detailed schematic of the Council Prime system. 47 heavily fortified worlds, the largest defensive fleet in galactic history. Orbital battle stations that could hold off an invasion force for centuries, and all of it protected by the most advanced shield technology ever developed. He manipulated the display, highlighting specific installations with casual expertise. Of course, all of those defenses were designed to repel external attacks. They were never intended to stop an assault that begins from within the system itself. My stomach dropped as understanding dawned. You have assets inside Council Prime. Frock, we have had assets inside Council Prime since the day we joined galactic civilization. Every human diplomat, every cultural exchange student, every trade representative who has ever set foot in the heart of galactic government has been building toward this moment. The scale of human deception was staggering. For 2 centuries they had played the role of eager newcomers, grateful for the opportunity to participate in galactic society. In reality, they had been conducting the most comprehensive intelligence operation in recorded history. The refugee processing centers, I said, pieces finally falling into place. The humanitarian aid stations, the cultural exchange programs, all military operations, Kane confirmed. Every act of apparent goodwill has been a strategic investment. Every gesture of friendship has been an opportunity to gather intelligence, position assets, and prepare for the day when the mask would finally come off. A new alarm chimed, and Torres looked up from her console with obvious excitement. Sir, Admiral Chen reports that the Ragnarok is in position for final approach to Council Prime. She requests confirmation of target priorities. Kane studied the tactical display for a long moment, his expression shifting from satisfaction to something approaching reverence. Tell the Admiral that all primary targets are confirmed. The Council has had 3,000 years to build their perfect fortress. Let us see how it stands up to human engineering. He turned to me one final time, and in his eyes I saw something that made me understand the true scope of our mistake. This was not revenge, though humanity certainly had grievances to settle. This was not conquest, though they were certainly seizing territory and resources. This was not even war in any conventional sense. This was an extermination operation, planned and executed with the methodical precision that humans brought to every endeavor they considered truly important. Thrak, Kane said quietly, you asked me earlier why we prepared for this conflict. The answer is simple. Because we knew it was inevitable. Every species that rises to prominence eventually faces a choice between domination and destruction. The Council chose domination long ago, building a system designed to ensure that established powers would never be challenged by newcomers. He gestured to the tactical display, where human fleets were systematically destroying the infrastructure of galactic civilization. We chose destruction, not of ourselves, but of the system that would have eventually consumed us. Today marks the end of the old galactic order and the beginning of something entirely new. And what happens to the rest of us? I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. Kane's smile was cold but not without compassion. Those who adapt will survive, those who cooperate will prosper. Those who resist, he shrugged eloquently. Natural selection has always been humanity's favorite teacher. The bridge around us erupted in controlled activity as the final phase of human operations began. Throughout the galaxy, the species that had betrayed humanity during their Festival of Unity were learning that some lessons could only be taught through overwhelming application of violence. And in the heart of the galaxy, the Ragnarok approached Council Prime with weapons capable of shattering worlds, carrying with it the accumulated rage of a species that had spent 2 centuries preparing for this exact moment. The old galactic order was ending. Something new was about to begin, and I had a front-row seat to watch it all burn. 24 hours later, I watched the heart of galactic civilization burn, and realized that gods bleed just like everyone else when you hit them hard enough. The assault on Council Prime began not with the thunder of weapons, but with silence. Every communication relay in the system simply 3,000 years of accumulated bureaucratic chatter, diplomatic negotiations, and administrative coordination vanished in an instant, replaced by the eerie quiet of a civilization holding its breath. Impressive, Kane muttered, studying the tactical display as human ships materialized throughout the Council Prime system. Admiral Chen's infiltration teams have been busy. The scope of human penetration was breathtaking. Ships emerged from hidden positions behind asteroids, within nebula clouds, and even tucked into the shadows of the massive orbital platforms that defended the system's heart. They had not simply infiltrated Council Prime, they had been living there for decades, patiently waiting for this moment. "Sir," Torres reported, her voice tight with excitement, "we are receiving status updates from insertion teams throughout the system. All primary communication nodes are down, defense coordination networks have been compromised, and the orbital shield generators are showing massive system failures." Kane nodded with grim satisfaction. "Signal the fleet. Begin final approach to Council Prime itself." Through the viewports of the UES Retribution, I could see the legendary world growing larger as our battle group closed the distance. Council Prime was not simply a planet, it was a monument to galactic power, its surface covered with gleaming cities that housed the representatives of 500 species. Orbital rings surrounded the world like metallic halos, each one larger than most space stations and bristling with defensive weapons. It should have been impregnable. It had been designed by the greatest military minds in galactic history, protected by technologies that represented millennia of accumulated knowledge, and defended by fleets that had never known defeat. But as I watched human ships methodically disable one defensive system after another, I began to understand that impregnable was a relative term when your enemies had spent 2 centuries studying every weakness in your armor. "Incoming transmission from Council Prime," the communications officer announced. "It's High Chancellor Morgoth himself." Kane's expression became predatory. "Put him through." The holographic display shimmered, and the image of the High Chancellor appeared. Morgoth was ancient even by Council standards, his crystalline features bearing the accumulated wisdom and arrogance of 3 centuries in power. Behind him I could see the ornate chambers of the High Council, though the usual atmosphere of serene authority had been replaced by barely controlled panic. "Admiral Kane," Morgoth said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority, "this madness must end. You have made your point. Humanity's military capabilities are impressive. But surely rational beings can find a diplomatic solution to this crisis." Kane leaned back in his command chair, apparently unmoved by the presence of the most powerful being in galactic civilization. "High Chancellor, how kind of you to contact us personally. I trust the view from your office windows is educational." Morgoth's crystalline features flickered with what might have been fear. "What are your terms?" "Unconditional surrender of all Council military assets, dissolution of the current governmental structure, complete cooperation with human occupation forces, and the immediate arrest and transfer of every being who participated in planning the attack on human space." "Those terms are completely unacceptable," Morgoth replied, though his voice lacked its usual conviction. "The Council represents 5 centuries of civilized government. We cannot simply dissolve because one species has chosen to embrace barbarism." Kane's laugh was like breaking glass. "Barbarism? High Chancellor, we are conducting this operation with surgical precision. Our targeting computers have identified and avoided every civilian area, every hospital, every school. We are destroying only military assets and governmental infrastructure." He gestured to the tactical display, where the orbital defenses of Council Prime were systematically failing. "If we were truly barbaric, this conversation would be taking place over the ashes of your world. Instead, we are offering you the opportunity to surrender with dignity intact. And if we refuse?" Kane's expression became arctic. "Then you will discover why humanity built the Ragnarok." The transmission from the surface cut off abruptly, replaced by emergency broadcasts as the remaining orbital platforms began targeting the approaching human fleet. Quantum torpedoes and plasma beams filled the void between the defending positions and the advancing ships, creating a light show that would have been beautiful under different circumstances. But the human fleet moved through the defensive fire like it was little more than a nuisance. Advanced shielding absorbed impacts that should have vaporized entire ships. Point defense systems intercepted incoming missiles with casual efficiency. And when the human ships finally returned fire, their weapons carved through supposedly impenetrable defenses like hot plasma through tissue paper. Sir, Torax called out. Admiral Chen is signaling from the Ragnarok. She reports ready to begin final bombardment. Kane studied the tactical display for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. Around us, the battle for Council Prime raged with increasing intensity as the last orbital defenses made their desperate stand against human technology that had been hidden for centuries. Signal the Admiral, Kane said finally. One demonstration shot. Target the northern polar defense complex. Let them see what they are facing. The Ragnarok was too distant to observe directly, but the tactical display tracked its massive bulk as it maneuvered into firing position. What followed was not simply a weapons discharge, but a revelation of power that redefined my understanding of what was possible. The beam that lanced out from humanity's planet killer was not visible to the naked eye, but its effects were immediately apparent. The Northern Polar Defense Complex, a fortified installation the size of a small continent, simply ceased to exist. No explosion, no dramatic secondary detonations, just a sudden absence where moments before there had been the pride of Council military engineering. The silence that followed was deafening. Incoming transmission from Council Prime, the communications officer announced, his voice barely steady. High Chancellor Morgeth requests immediate cessation of hostilities. Put him through, Kane ordered. Morgeth's image reappeared, but the authority and arrogance were gone, replaced by the hollow expression of someone who had just watched the impossible become terrifyingly real. Your terms, he said simply. We accept your terms. Kane nodded with satisfaction. Excellent. You have 1 hour to begin the transfer of all military command codes to human forces. All Council fleets throughout the galaxy will stand down immediately. Any resistance to human occupation forces will be met with immediate and overwhelming retaliation. Understood, Morgeth replied, his voice barely a whisper. What happens to us now? Kane's expression softened slightly, though it remained implacably determined. Those who cooperate will be treated fairly. Those who caused this war will face justice, and the galaxy will learn to function under a new order, one based on merit and capability rather than ancient privilege and established power. The transmission ended, and Kane turned to his crew with obvious satisfaction. Signal all human forces throughout the galaxy. The war is over. Begin Phase 5 occupation operations immediately. As the bridge crew began implementing the orders that would reshape galactic civilization, I found myself staring at the tactical display in stunned amazement. In less than a week, humanity had dismantled a governmental structure that had endured for millennia, defeated military forces that had never known defeat, and established themselves as the dominant power in known space. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect was how thoroughly they had planned for this moment. Every strategy, every weapon, every infiltration operation had been designed not just to win a war but to minimize casualties and preserve the infrastructure they would need to govern their new empire. Thrak, Kane said, drawing my attention back to the present. You have been very helpful during this operation. Admiral Chen has authorized me to offer you a choice. I looked at him with a mixture of curiosity and dread. What kind of choice? You can return to your people and help them adjust to the new reality. Your experience with human military doctrine will be valuable as the galaxy learns to function under our governance. Or, he paused, studying my expression carefully. You can join us. Humanity has always valued intelligence and adaptability, regardless of species origin. The offer was both generous and terrifying. To work with the victors meant abandoning everything I had believed about galactic civilization. But the alternative was to return to a universe that no longer existed, where the old certainties had been replaced by human efficiency and human justice. What would happen to the other species? I asked. The ones who joined the attack on humanity? Kane's expression became thoughtful. That depends on them. Species that acknowledge their mistakes and work to make amends will find humanity to be surprisingly forgiving. Those that continue to resist or plot revenge, he shrugged eloquently. Natural selection will take its course. Over the next several hours, I watched the systematic transformation of galactic governance unfold with mechanical precision. Human occupation forces took control of key installations throughout Council space. Administrative systems that had operated for centuries were replaced with human alternatives that functioned with terrifying efficiency. in species that had considered themselves masters of the galaxy, found themselves learning to take orders from beings they had dismissed as primitive newcomers. But perhaps the most telling moment came when Admiral Chen herself arrived at Council Prime to accept the formal surrender of galactic civilization. As her shuttle approached the landing platform where centuries of diplomats had conducted the business of 500 worlds, I realized that we were witnessing the end of one age and the beginning of another. The ceremony itself was brief and efficient, conducted with the same surgical precision that had characterized every aspect of human military operations. Margeth and the surviving council members formally transferred authority to human command, signed documents that restructured galactic law, and accepted the new reality with whatever dignity they could muster. Chen, for her part, was gracious in victory. She spoke of partnership rather than conquest, of cooperation rather than subjugation, of building a future where merit mattered more than species origin or ancient privilege. Her words were carefully chosen and diplomatically correct, but as I watched her accept the surrender of beings who had ruled the galaxy since before humanity had learned to build starships, I understood that we were witnessing something far more significant than a change of government. We were seeing the emergence of a new form of galactic civilization, one shaped by human values and enforced by human capabilities. 6 months later, I found myself serving as a liaison officer between human administration and the surviving council species. The work was challenging but rewarding, helping to bridge the gap between the old ways and the new reality. And as I traveled throughout what was now called the Human Commonwealth, I began to see the benefits of the new order. Corruption, endemic under the old council system, had been eliminated through human administrative efficiency. Interspecies conflicts that had simmered for centuries were resolved through human mediation backed by overwhelming force. Trade flowed more freely, scientific advancement accelerated, and for the first time in galactic history, justice was applied equally regardless of species or political influence. But I never forgot the lesson of those terrible days when humanity revealed its true nature. The beings who smiled and negotiated and cooperated during peacetime were also capable of planning and executing the most comprehensive military campaign in recorded history. They had hidden their true capabilities for 2 centuries, patiently building the tools they would need to reshape galactic civilization according to their vision. They called it the Sleeping Giant Doctrine, and it had proven devastatingly effective. But as I worked with human administrators and officers, I began to understand that the doctrine was more than just military strategy. It was a fundamental aspect of human nature, the ability to appear harmless while preparing for the moment when overwhelming force would become necessary. The galaxy had betrayed humanity during their Festival of Unity, expecting to crush a minor species that had grown too confident. Instead, they had awakened something that had been waiting for exactly this opportunity. And now, as I filed my reports and attended my meetings in the gleaming efficiency of human-controlled space, I could not help but wonder what other sleeping giants might be stirring in the depths of human civilization. After all, a species capable of planning for 2 centuries to overthrow galactic government was probably capable of planning for whatever challenges the universe might present in the future. And having seen what humans could accomplish when they decided to stop playing nice, I found that thought both comforting and absolutely terrifying. The old galactic order was gone, destroyed by beings who had learned to smile while sharpening their knives. The new order was efficient, just and peaceful, as long as nobody was foolish enough to threaten it. And as I submitted my final report on the transformation of galactic civilization, I couldn't help but smile at the thought that somewhere in the depths of space, human planners were probably already preparing for challenges that wouldn't emerge for another 2 centuries. Because that, I had learned, was simply what humans did. They planned, they prepared, they waited, and when the time came, they struck with the accumulated force of a species that had never learned to accept defeat. The galaxy had learned that lesson the hard way. I hoped they would remember it.